Hello, can you hear me? Lovely. Welcome to my talk. I'm Simon Holmedal. We have 40 minutes, I've been informed, so we're going to do a little sprint through this. I'm going to start by showing you a quick reel of some of the curiosities, which is basically our little studio projects, non-commercial projects that we do at Panoply. We'll talk more about Panoply afterwards. Let's just look at this quickly. Okay, whatever. So we are Panoply. We're a small design studio based in London, the UK. We're a little bit spread out because we're kind of remote thing anyway. We mess around a lot with 3D. We work with Houdini as our main tool, so this is going to be quite Houdini-centric and complicated. Hopefully, I'm going to try to keep it as so anyone can understand it, but there's no promises. Yeah, we're called Panoply. For those of you who don't know what that word means, I didn't know either. It means a collection, an impressive collection of things. It can also mean an armor, apparently. It's an English word that no one knows, unless you're like good with words and stuff, which I'm not. So, first thing, because we don't really have a reel, and I want to show a little bit of a slightly different project that we did than what we normally do. This is a project we did for Marvel, for Ant-Man. It was a concept art project, but through animation. And instead of wasting time on it, this is where we draw down the volume of the audio clip, by the way, because I'm going to try to talk over it, and it's not going to work, and I'm not going to be able to breathe. So let's try it, because I tried this once before. It didn't work, but I'm trying it again. So let's see if that works. Enjoy. So. Yeah, so, okay, you can have a little bit of audio. I feel a little bit lonely now. So this, we were tasked to design how technology and water and different elements would evolve and kind of grow on in this tiny verse, the Ant-Man universe. So these are all explorations of furniture kind of forming, and what we see here is a control interface for steering this little mini spaceship. So you would like wrap around your arm, and then we can't show some of this other stuff because it's IP around it, so that's why it's in black void, so it's a little bit hard to understand. We also need to figure out how water could work on this scale. So there was waterfalls and other things, and energy. So these are some of the explorations that we did for how water could behave in this microscopic, I don't even know what to call it. It's like smaller than microscopic, it's, what do you call it? Atomic universe of the Ant-Man world. It's been a while since we did this. We also looked at how environments could react to various types of interactions and continuously evolve and shift and transform. This was a good example of that. It comes back to it. Looking at molds and stuff and how that could potentially be a part of it, and surface tension. This thing is kind of interesting. We kind of used it as a trigger to then run simulations that it would evolve surfaces and transition them from various types of terrain. This thing here is actually a model of COVID, so it was like reinfections and stuff. We kind of modeled all of that and then colored the kind of recovery period. So that was something that we played around with and used it in this one too. This is COVID as well. It was obviously done during the pandemic, so we were spending a lot of time on it, and it was about 5 or 6 months of just continuous testing and exploring and outputting stuff. Energy was another thing that we wanted to be contained within a sphere that then the spacecraft could then kind of hug onto and propel them forward. So that was one part of the brief, like figuring out how to visualize energy and evolve it in various. This one really like think that one turned out nice because it has this electric refractive element to it, but there's no electricity in it. It's just the way the light happens to bend. It just automatically creates that sort of effect. And then the complete opposite of that, like a magnetic repulsion type of idea. Whatever. Okay, so that's it. So that was a concept art project, which is not something we normally haven't done that much. We have done it a couple of times. But it was really fun and really stressful for 6 months straight. I want to talk to you about a recent project we did for MBA. This was the finals, so the MBA finals. And in their regular campaign, they had a lot of silver and iridescence that are kind of representing their brand package. And this was a pitch, and we kind of presented this idea of a... I guess I'm playing it first. We presented an idea which uses this shimmer technique, which we call it, which is this transitional element that can reveal information through silver, through iridescence, into gold, and then having sealing moment. And it's a continuous, you'll see a lot of it, and we'll talk more about it. I'm just going to play a little clip from it first, so you can sort of get an idea what I'm talking about, and then we'll go into it. So yeah, shimmer. So that's what I was trying to describe. So it was this ever-evolving, shimmering thing that would reveal all this. The idea behind the iridescence, I should maybe give you a little bit of background. That is, all the team logos would have different brand colors. So it was really hard to know who would be in the finals. So that's part of the thinking there behind the kind of iridescence. It could be any of them, and just kind of meet and form all these different things. And it was, a fully procedural system we developed. There was this notion of a landscape that we wanted to kind of push forward first as part of this brand package, which was the idea of before you go out into a game, you would find your happy space and like meditate and be in your mind, and that would be like the calm before the storm. So the idea was that this was going to live within a natural environment, and we were going to have this shimmer kind of mold moving through the space and breaking down various elements. We tried to take solid shapes with like iridescent qualities and breaking them down into gold parts, so then we could then transition. But the reality of a brand package like this, we have hundreds of deliverables. A lot of information is presented really quickly, and this just felt, it could be a nice background and stuff, but there's definitely ways to make it work. But we kind of started to explore more like a mold or like a liquid type of effect. This is not a traditional liquid. You like to explore and test various weird micro solvers and sub solvers and stuff to just advect points and propagate attributes to form something a little bit different than just a flip fluid or a vellum sim or whatever. So this was a attempt to kind of merge two different things. It's glitchy It's very glitchy. I was about to swear. I do that too much. And we were just continuously exploring this. But once again, once we got to this point, it started to work. We started to be able to transform it to this is the trophy, by the way. I should have said that if that wasn't clear. It started to work, but again, we're still doing this. We're still doing an exploration where we don't really move with enough impact time-wise, so we had to kind of rethink it a bit more, and it was this continuous exploration. We also had the idea of going through other types of material properties. So in this particular case, it starts like a glass and then goes like translucent and subsurfacey. And then we worked on how it kind of evolved on the surfaces and through the volume of the shape as it builds off and transitions. But it's lacking the kind of iridescent qualities. This one is a little bit more explosive, but we started exploring various types of coordinate spaces like UVs and rest positions and stuff to advect a flow on the surface. You can kind of look at it here. You see there's almost like a ripple effect that happens over the surface as after it's kind of transformed. So it's not just something grows on and then it's there. It has like an aftershock or a secondary motion to it, which we found was quite interesting. Here we're starting to introduce more of that iridescent properties, the different colors. But it wasn't until we got to this point where we managed to get the nice flow that kind of pulses, and it felt almost like magnetic, that we really felt like we had something that we really liked. So that's kind of where we ended up, more or less, this kind of stretched magnetic patterns that happens over the surface through that, and it really highlights that iridescent qualities. So we ended up with this. This is kind of some of the shots from the trophy film, which is, you know, a part of the whole package. They were all used in various different ways throughout the entire graphic package. So, you know, this is just a few clips from that. But let's talk about how it was made. So here's another little experiment where I tried to render up the viewport in a kind of futuristic manner instead of showing you the UI of Houdini. So we started with our meshes that we kind of tinted in different ways based on their color of the various team logos, for example. And we also placed various start points that kind of had their own group assigned to them, so that we could save this out as a file and just dump all the logos and all the different things we wanted to process into a folder, and they would then get processed. So here's some example of some other logos that we did. I think we did like 30 of them, and this project had hundreds of deliverables. Many of these were like combined in different matchups between different teams and whatnot, and delivered as, you know, caches and stuff that they could, on their end, when they knew which teams were in the finals and stuff, would be, you know, be useful for them in the package. So the first thing we did, because all the logos had such different shapes, some have really smooth curvature, some have hard edges and stuff. You know, when we developed this system initially, we built it for the trophy, which has quite sharp corners. But because of this, we needed a consistency, so we kind of figured out a way to flatten off any round areas internally, so that we would have this kind of faceting that you see here. And that allowed us to create high curvature pathways that then could transition and draw on some of the meaningful detail of the shapes, so that it would instantly be recognizable during a transition or a short clip. And this is part of Houdini. It's all node-based. So do you guys use Houdini? Crickets. Okay, that's good. One, probably 2, 3 people. So that's cool. So I don't want to maybe bore you with this, but the simple theory here is that we have a surface like this, and it has normals on it pointing out. So if you then compare the direction of a normal against something pointing straight up, you can then find a value between 0 and -1. So if you then limit it on like a 45-degree angle, you can then group those points and pin them and then smooth out the rest. And that basically results in this effect where it kind of flattens. So that's the kind of thinking behind there. So this gives us this kind of mesh that we've also kind of created an internal structure here that allows the volume to fill in internally, but always with an emphasis on, you know, key features of any shape. And this is fully procedural, obviously, so whenever there was new logos that needed to be processed, that could then just feed through the same logic. And here's some close-ups of just the straight-up progression of the surface. Obviously, that's not where the job isn't done there, because a lot of it is happening through the attributes and everything. And one of those attributes were timestamps. So we just created a point cloud of X million particles, I don't know how many. And for each location on this, we made sure that whenever that previous mesh that we saw were in contact with a particle, it would record a timestamp. So we now know when any coordinate space within this volume has been triggered. And using this information, you can generate a lot of useful stuff. You can create various transitional gradients and fall-offs and pulses and everything. So using this, what you're looking at here is actually the different stages of the shader. So there's like 7 or so different material properties. They're all blending seamlessly throughout the progression. And each of these colors here represent a part of that transition. It might alter what type of bump map is visible, or what type of pulse speed or something is happening, or material properties such as silver to gold to iridescence and like more vibrant pulses of the gold, for example. We also used it as a way of, as I say, repeating the time. So if you have a timestamp and you're just modulating it, this is math now we're talking about, but if you take a value that is a timestamp and you multiply it by a number and then modulating it, it can then create ripples through time that can be used as waves of this energy that kind of helps to inform the progression. Another thing here is we wanted to make sure we had a UV mesh, something that has a consistent point count that we can kind of attach textures to that flows along the progression. And we did that by running it in reverse, so finding the last frame and then pinning it to the progression and then reversing it back. So that way we could always reference this surface if we needed a fixed coordinate space that would flow with it. And I realize this might be a little bit complicated what I'm talking about, but I hope not. And from the timestamps, we can also, if you imagine all those particles and you imagine that from each particle you look around yourself and you find all the ones that are of a higher time space, like they were infected later or like triggered later, you can then point in that direction. So this also gives us these paths that we can use in order to drive particle systems or other secondary motions. It's all informed by the previous step of the transition. So everything is designed based on the previous step. So it's like a kind of pipeline of designing a system that then drives itself and then generates an end result in the end that is procedural. So you can prepare it once and then deploy it over hundreds of assets, which is what we did. And this here is this is how it's actually defining that direction. So for the point cloud, we're looking up nearby points. We're comparing our current time infected, which is what I call it under the hood, with the found point and collect all the ones that have a higher value of the current point. And then just taking their position and dividing it by the count I found. And that gives you a position of the average of those points. And then that becomes a direction that then drives other things, such in this case, a particle system, where we just move it in the opposite direction. So it's kind of peeling back almost like wherever, and these particles are triggered as soon as that timestamp is triggered. So whenever an area is activated, that triggers particles that then move in the opposite direction of that flow. Are we following? Falling asleep? I hope it's not too boring. We're also using that same coordinate space to advect coordinates, so such as normals and UVs and stuff, so that we can have textures now flow over the surface. This is just an exaggerated example of a noise pattern. As you can see, this is not obviously how it looked in the end. All of these things are rendered representation of each step of the process that I'm trying to, this is what I was saying, it's a little bit of an experiment here on this talk, see if that works, but I hope it somehow demystifies some of the complexities, maybe. So this gives us the final results of these various animations. So here are some examples, and they're all, again, using the exact same system. We also ran this across entire alphabet and symbols and everything, so there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these that we had to process. And when doing this, we used PDG or TOPS, which is a procedural dependency graph thing, which was introduced fairly recently in Houdini, which allows you to run things in parallel. It just allows you to select an entire folder of files, and it would then run them in parallel, and it can distribute it on a farm or on different machines on a network. So yeah, these are some of them. I'll just push it through. We need to move forward because I have loads more. And this wouldn't be a Houdini talk if I didn't actually show you the graph, and this is where I actually have some notes. So give me 1 second. Because I don't really use notes necessarily. So here you can sort of see on the left an overview of the entire graph, and on the very right there, you see the top graph, which is the one that kind of distributes it across different things. So at the very top, we're loading in our initial geometry, and creating a VDB base shape, which is like a volume representation of the shape. And we're also creating that force angle stuff, the kind of angular surface that allows us to progress even smooth shapes. We then create the pathways and highways, which is like the speedy paths that it can progress faster on, and also taking into account disconnected objects if you have logos that have different parts. I know this is getting a little bit out there now. I feel like I shouldn't be talking about this. We're also creating a reference mesh for the UVs, and we're shifting our rest position. So now I'm a little bit lost there where we are in this. Oh yeah, so this is the actual VDB sim that we're looking at now. And if we dive into that, you can see even more nodes, so it's all nested logic here. And then we spit out that volume representation of the surface as it progresses. After that, we're creating the static mesh that I talked for UVs, but it's also used for distortions later on for like secondary motion. And then we're doing our rest shift. So basically the noise pattern that was traveling over the surface is happening on the right there. And then we're transferring over a lot of these attributes and deforming here as well. We're deforming the secondary motions, so we have like a kind of triggering of the surface overall that kind of deforms the entire thing. This is not that useful. It's more of a overview. I feel like this is like a little bit, I don't want to make you fall asleep, so we move away from that and go on. So this is a short little clip that kind of shows some of the R&D from this project. Have a look. Okay, let's move on. Thank you. I'm trying to kind of just rush through this. I don't know if you can tell. Definitely needed more time for this project to talk about it in detail. But another project we recently did, which kind of span off some projects that we've done before, not the least this one we just looked at, was for Seattle Sounders. They came to us. They had seen a film we did a few years back, which is called Tide. If you haven't seen it, you check it out. It was quite mesmeric film about the cyclical nature of life and different geometric forms formed by super intricate fluid simulations. And they really like that because Seattle they have a connection to water, and the Seattle Sounders as well, they always had like waves and stuff, and they had this orca mascot and a bunch of this stuff that is related to water and where they are based. And also the Space Needle as well in Seattle was also a very big part of their brand. But since they liked the Tide stuff, we were like, okay, let's start playing around. And in a very similar fashion, we used P2G to feed in a lot of their old logos. So the reason this film needed to happen was because they were rebranding. They had a new logo. This is some of their old logos. And again, these are all running through the same top graph. In this case, we're not looking at geometry. We're just sending images with alphas, and that generates all these different simulations based on that, using the same logic. So these are some of the logos. They've been around since, I think, 1974, I believe. There's a number in here that probably reminds me. And then they had a new logo which also had a crest, so it's like a shield. And you can see the wave patterns as well here, which is representative of the water and the year 1974. So there's some renders we did for their logo as just to test various shots and stuff and what could happen in the piece. I also mentioned the Space Needle. I had this idea that we could use it because it all needs to make sense in the piece. So I thought we could use it as a kind of a sundial or sun clock. So the shadow would then be cast over the previous logos as a way of showing the passing of time and also going through the various logos that way. So that was part of the film. And then, you know, we kept exploring with, obviously we knew they liked this tight stuff that we had done. So we kept throwing a lot of the other iconography they had. They had a lot of graphic design work done with a lot of their various like lore around the, so like the orca and stuff, playing football or soccer as they call it. SFC Football Club, Sounders Football Club, yeah, a bunch of different logo marks. So again, this always designing with this kind of scalability so that the system can apply to whatever we feed it, and designing with that in mind allows all of these iterations of the just using, you know, the same system, and just allows to scale the output a lot more, which is something we do a lot of. Another thing, due to the ocean idea, and we wanted to tie it back to soccer and football, is that we made like jerseys, like virtual jerseys, and had them flow like waves, you know, as a way of presenting the information in different ways in an edit, to again link back to the water connection that they had. So these are some examples of that. And again, the Space Needle. I think this is the video where I play the video so you can see what I'm talking about. And then we're going to talk about some of the internal systems again. Okay, let's just move on. We're really short on time, so I'm going to carry on. So I'm going to go through the graphical version of this. I have the node graph there if those are interested. But so yeah, this is the crest itself with the waves, just rendered as a metal. And I realized, I apologize for all the darkness and all of this stuff. It's very hard to see in this room, probably. There's also a sand particle system underneath it, representing the beach and the water where they meet. First thing we were doing is we were generating paths because we were thinking about the water hitting the shore, and we were using the actual crest as the shore method, like just to make sense of it, you know. So we created these paths, and we then ran a gas sim, essentially a 2D gas sim, that tries to follow these paths, and when it hits the logo, they follow like key features of the logo and start spilling over. And the idea here is we use this later on to drive the particle systems, but also to trigger the animations of the actual crest and reveal of that watery transition that we made. So the second step was very much the same thing, but intersecting it with the shape. So if you imagine the crest is there, and wherever the gas is intersecting with it, you see metal here. again, this is a representation, it's not how it was presented, as you can see, but this became a starting point for when the transition could start. Using this intersection, we then run like a vellum fluid sim within the logo, so it collides with the external shape of the logo and running like essentially a water sim. This has been scaled down for the presentation, the actual, so it doesn't really come across that much like water here, but at a full res version of it, it was a lot more clear. This then feeds into a SOP solver that uses curvature and also that initial smoke sim to advect and progress it faster if the movement of the progression is aligned with that general flow. So it's almost like being pulled by the wind of the other thing, essentially. And we're doing a similar thing like we did in MBA, where we're recording these timestamps for, in this case, it's obviously quite useful. We're dealing with a watery transition. We want to have waves and pulses of energy. And that then triggered another sim. So we drove those things, and we're now running another sim that intersects in 2D, just straight on like this. But this is later on used as a bump map. So it's a way of like making a water transition without running a water sim necessarily. It's a technique that we came up with on a previous project for a tequila film we did. That just served us really well. And this is some of the key features of the logo. So we're using that. If you point towards any high curvature area and then rotate 90 degrees, you get this really nice flow. So whenever the progression got to the logo, it could then start swirling, when it arrived there, essentially. We can mix these different velocity fields. And now if we're putting that secondary smoke sim on top of this as a bump map on this metallic shape, you can sort of see what I mean. You start to see everything is informed by the previous step, and you have that water transition. And together with the time steps or like the time samples and stuff that we created, you can kind of then transition it to a more solid, refined, and shape. I mentioned the tequila film, so this is a snippet of there where we used this very similar technique in order to create this infusion of the wood and stuff into the liquid and building the bottle out that way. And it used a very similar method, essentially. As always, it's also a good idea to have some UV coordinates, something you can latch onto and record data to. So in this case, we used particles to just advect them along that growing surface so that we knew that we have a fixed point count, particle count that we can sample to get coordinates if we want some texture or something to flow with the progression. And here you can see everything starting to come together, where we have the particles that are driven by all the underlying layers, and it's all, combined more or less, minus the shader, obviously. And if we look at the shader on its own here, this is the actual transitions. This was actually the first time we used Karma. This was the Karma alpha version in 19.5. So it was a lot of learning through the USD pipeline and everything that we had to figure out, and we still are figuring that out. It's not that straightforward. But because we were building this with PDG in mind, we could have different start points of the system and trigger it from different places, so we could run 4 or 5 different versions of this sim, and then when we were framing different shots for the sequence, we could just pick this sim for this shot, this sim for that shot, and then it would just set it and forget it kind of thing. So that was pretty good and pretty cool. Yeah, so there's a few. They all look quite similar when you just look at them like this, but when you're in amongst it, they do progress differently. And here's this thing again. I'm not even going to bother. I don't think it's worth it. But you can see an overview of the network and all the logic there. And then on the right, again, you see the top graph. God, we don't have time to go through it anyway, to be honest. I have like 5 minutes left, so yikes. Okay, but yeah, that's the result of that. You can't see it because it's too bright in here. But there's particles there in the void. Look at it on your own time, I suppose. And these are some of the shots from those various sims that were brought together for this film. Ay, 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 ay. Here we are. What have I done with my life? Okay. So, yeah, so here's a bit of a reel for this. This should have audio, by the way, I think, but don't worry about it if you don't want to. Yeah. Enjoying yourself? It's awkward now, no audio on it. We were doing these match clips as well with, you know, the grass fields and the hoops, or not hoops, but like the actual, you know, the goal and everything. So we always try to like link visually how something can flow together. There was also the idea of sound when it's like Seattle Sounders, so like, and the water waves and the ripples of the surface and shit from that. Yada yada yada, you know. Yeah. Yeah, I was just messing around and playing with the different, and this is the color palette as well. That's why it's all blue and cyan, and you know, yeah. Yeah, we're kind of out of time, I think. I just quickly, technically I have 5 minutes now. I'm gonna be true to my word and finish it on time. So we've been exploring all these different things. We do a lot of technical, high-end 3D abstractions and stuff. But we're also trying to bring some of that stuff into, we're trying to expand our horizons as much as we can. And one thing we've been playing around with a little bit is, I did this project as a curiosity, was like the sculptural form structure. I don't know if you've seen it, it's called VRE, and it's this furniture type architectural forms that are kind of growing on. And I wanted to, there it is, let's look at it. Anyway, whatever, it grows on. And then this is actually my first attempt at trying to bring this into a real-time environment. So this is actually a version of it running in Unreal, which I have no idea what I'm doing with Unreal. But I managed to get this working, and I've tried it in VR, and it's very trippy and bad frame rate and nauseating. But it's something we're exploring, you know, trying to port some of this stuff into like a virtual real-time environment. It's pretty cool. So I've had this in my living room at home. Just stood in front of it and like, oh, just put my head in it. It's pretty fun. But, you know, this is something we're looking to explore, but, you know, there's so much stuff to learn, so much stuff to play around with and mess around with. And Houdini is a deep rabbit hole as it is. Yeah, there you go. It's all in a void. There you go. Anyway, thank you guys for coming. I technically have 2 minutes left, so we can just stand there in silence. No, but okay, there's a question. I don't know. Can you? Yeah, is that okay? Yeah. Oh, he wants to bring a mic, though.
How much time did you spend on the MBA? Or sorry.
MBA Sounders? Which one? I think it was. It slips my mind a little bit. 2 or 3 months. 2 or 3 months from start to finish. From idea development to everything. All we had to go by was the fact that they liked the idea of water and all of this lore about like their iconography and the tradition. Like in the music, you can hear as well, like this starts off with like 70s rock and stuff, and then it became, and how the culture of the city changed over to, so it's all interweaved to it. Like there's a lot more to it than we had time to talk about now, but yeah, it was about 2-3 months, and the same. I think it was 3, maybe 4 months for MBA, and that had hundreds of deliverables. So that was kind of stressful knowing that, but slowly building up that kind of pipeline, and they come back for more logos and stuff. Only last week I had to redeliver some stuff with like 2 days notice, and but the system is robust, so you just chew through it and spit it out the other end, which is pretty cool.
The audio partner as well?
So we work with different external audio partners. So Human Robot Soul did the audio for this kind of clips. I think for both these, but the audio wasn't really used in the NBA thing because they have their own audio. I think we're out of time, but I'm around, so feel free to come up to me. I don't bite usually. So yeah, thank you guys.